Hey everyone, it's me, Queen PR, and we are back with one of my favorite people in the world, Mr. Brian H. Waters, for a bonus episode.
What's up? How you feeling today?
I am feeling good. It's one of those days where I need to sit around and talk about wrestling and especially women's wrestling. And going back, I love retrospectives, and we are heading into a new era. 2 new championships were introduced in the women's division in WWE, something that has been rumored to be happening for a long time. A lot of title unifications going on. And I'm glad that the women's division is being treated as such and getting that transformation as well. I want to go more into it. We're going to be examining the Smackdown Women's Championship that is now defunct and is now the World's Women's title?
Yes, the Women's World Championship now.
There you go. Yep. So it has not a brand specific name, which I think people were happy about. I want to go back to 2016, Brian, and when there was another championship introduced into the women's division. Mm-hmm. We're going to start from Becky Lynch, of course. We'll go into the championship by numbers and some of the most notable reigns and feuds around the blue brand.
Real quick, because you know how, I usually tell you when stuff remind me of things. Mm-hmm. So I know you're a huge Jay-Z fan. So when you was like, I want to go back, it reminded me of the Unplugged album. You know which part I'm talking about?
No, you gotta tell me.
He's like, I want to go back 98. And then I think that's when he went into the Can I Get Her on that album. So that was, I'm not going to take up too much time with the story, but like,
you can always take up time talking about Jay-Z on this platform.
Yeah, because like, so 10th grade, I remember I bought the CD from a bootlegger. Ironically, so I was always told that the people who had the bootlegs in Baltimore would always go to New York, get their hookup, and then bring them back. But he was, I remember I was like, all right, let me grab that. I already had the Blueprint 1, and man, with like that CD, it made me appreciate live music for rap music. Because I always played live music in church and heard it in church, but to have it for rap music, I was like, wow.
The coolest thing.
Yeah, so imagine me going home, putting in the Unplugged album in my headphones and playing Jay-Z on the drums.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so
it really does.
When you said wanted to go back.
Yep. We're going to go back. We're going to talk about everything that has to do with this championship. But first, I want to talk about the new ones really quickly. I kind of wish Triple H announced them.
Okay.
Only because, when Triple H comes out, it's important. And I like Scrap Daddy. Mm-hmm. That's who I call Adam Pearce because that's his Twitter handle for whatever reason. So, and I always be in my twin, shout out to Letty, always thought it was funny. But I love that I love him. Mm-hmm. But it would have been nice to see like Triple H or even Stephanie. I know that's like wild thinking, but at one point she was kind of the voice for these new changes, with the women.
She could have came back for one night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
1,000%. Yeah, but I like them.
So, especially since this is going on Patreon first, I'm going to give people an exclusive. Because that guy Greg had kind of like said that what I said was a bad take, right? When I stated that the championships should have been all announced together. And I look at it like this. You could have announced the title in a way where I understand you wanted to wait till Roman got to 1,000 days. Mm-hmm. All right. Maybe Roman's belt could have came later. Maybe not. But I don't know. I just felt that it did the women a disservice to announce their championships last and the fact they look just like the men's belts. because it's still saying, okay, we're still keeping you down here. That's what I was saying. So I wish they could have, when they revealed, they could have, in all honesty, they could have revealed at least the women's world title. Like they could have revealed all of them, and then let Roman's belt be the last one. His, you know, it would have been fine. He could have been the last one. We could have had an assumption that it was going to look like Asuka's belt, but that's how I felt.
I can see where you're coming from, and it just goes to why I wish Triple H was the one to announce them. So a lot of things like Trisha's heel turn and things like that to me felt flat. I'm excited about the transformation. You know, I'm going to take it as I see it. I'm not going to complain, but this is the platform where we discuss the women's division through this lens. Are they being treated on the same level? Are the optics the same as the men? And we have absolutely come a long way since then. So I'm excited for the future.
No, 100%. And that's what I'm, you know, forever grateful. Anytime I get a chance to come on this platform, talk women's wrestling, you know, I've always been a fan. I've told you, you know, back in the day, you know, Alundra Blaze, not only was she like my first wrestling crush, but she was like, I really enjoy her wrestling. Her matches with Bull Nakano, her matches with Leilani Kai at WrestleMania 10, and you know, the series of matches she had with Bertha Faye, you know, that was like those emotions. She found ways to like draw emotions. It's sad that she's been so distant from the WWE that she doesn't get her just due. But you know, so I'm just excited that now, you know, we're getting this type of content far as women's wrestling is concerned, and that there's this platform here where we can talk about it.
Yeah, and that's why I love having you on, because you are a women's wrestling fan at the end of the day. And we are approaching 10 years of the women's evolution. So that's a lot of history that has been made, which is so exciting. So doing these retrospectives is always fun, especially with you, Brian. So let's go into the SmackDown Women's Championship. Do you remember when they announced? Because at this point, the Raw Women's Championship has you know what I'm trying to say, has existed. How did you feel?
It didn't hit me as hard as like, they got a SmackDown Women's Championship. Like, I don't remember the announcement the way, you know, the WrestleMania announcement with Lita, the presentation, or even knowing that we was getting a new women's championship, the name was changing, going into WrestleMania 32. That was memorable. But this was still good because I said, okay, well, you knew you had, you always, like, SmackDown always felt more intimate, if that makes any sense, because of the 2 hours, because it was on, well, at this point, it was on USA. But because it was a shorter show, it just always felt more intimate. Always felt more like the workhorse show. There was a point in time, and I remember when people would say, oh, SmackDown is terrible, you know, and that's when you're in the mid-2000s. There was a lot of people saying that, like, oh, man, nobody watch SmackDown. And I'm talking right before Mark Henry's world title run. But then afterwards, you know, it just, like, actually, I should say right before the whole Christian, you know, Christian Randy Orton. I'm pretty sure you've seen their series on Peacock. But right before then, right? But now we're in the time period we have in the draft. In the, you know, they redid the brand split, and I was excited for it. Now, you know, wasn't sure exactly, you know, who was going to be the first champion, but I was definitely excited for it.
That's I love hearing your perspective because you never fell out of wrestling. So it kind of like, I feel like it hits different because you've literally seen the slow burn of everything, even if you don't realize it's a slow burn. So seeing the evolution of like, okay, wow, now they're getting a secondary championship for the blue brand. Like, that's fucking awesome. So let's look back on SmackDown Championship by numbers. So the first champion was Becky Lynch. She won it in a 6-pack challenge. And we'll get into that match later on. The last champion was Rhea Ripley. She won it in a spectacular, probably will be one of the top 10 WrestleMania women's matches at WrestleMania, I think, against Charlotte Flair.
Honestly, it might be a top 10 WrestleMania match.
I agree. I agree.
And, you know, we was all there, and not to be saying it from a braggadocious standpoint by any means, right? But we was there, we was watching, and we was feeling the emotions live. But sometimes when you go back and watch a match, it doesn't hit the same. Right. That one hit the same and probably different.
100%.
Especially you got to see the emotions on Rhea's face. She did not come to play.
And neither did Charlotte.
Facts.
And we are seeing different sides of both women. So let's go into Rhea Ripley as the last SmackDown Women's Champion, now that we're talking about it. And her win at Mania, because I think it's a very pivotal moment in her career. She's going against the perennial champion, you know, Charlotte Flair, who is coming back stronger. She's a baby face. She's hungry. And there's always that chance we saw before she, surprising, the most reigns at 7. It's a possibility that Charlotte could have also walked out as champion because of just who she is. But now you have Rhea, who now has this new persona. She's owning it. She made history at the Royal Rumble. She earned this match. Her and Charlotte have history. And they showed up and they showed out. And one thing that I will say about their match is there was a lot of criticism coming from myself about the build-up to that match. To the feud, there wasn't enough storytelling. They didn't have a lot of on-screen stuff besides like the usual brawl. They can't stay away from each other. You have all the security and everything, which was cool. I enjoyed it, but it was kind of like, okay, I wish they were doing more with it. But if you really think about it in hindsight, you know, fickle wrestling fan, we didn't need that because of their history, because of their story. And then they were able to tell the story in the ring, which is what WrestleMania is all about. So I'm glad that you said that this match might be like top 10 WrestleMania matches, because we felt it. It gave everything that it needed to give. My sister Letty actually was not convinced with Rhea as SmackDown Women's Champion, but I think with this reign in the context of this retrospective, I think it was what was needed for Rhea to finally get to that next level.
But one of the things, too, that I want to talk about with them, too, is that when you look back at Rhea and Charlotte, just looking at those two going face to face, that looks like money.
Right.
If you're not a wrestling fan, but you know a little something, it just looks like money, right? And both of those ladies passed the airport test. You look at them, they look like they somebody. You see them in the gym, they look like they somebody, you know, and they put in the work. And so, like, my favorite match for a while was Charlotte. Well, favorite like women's match was Charlotte and Asuka. And I thought nothing was wrong with that match. I know a lot of people like to talk about that, you know, Charlotte shouldn't have won, but I felt nothing was wrong with that match. But that was, when I go back and look at it, that was like a respectful wrestling match. This was a fight. This was a brawl. And this felt like, out of all the WrestleMania matches, when they putting together those videos of matches that felt super personal, that match better be in that montage. And that's what I liked about it. I thought, you know, going in from just, what was she, number 1 at the Royal Rumble? I be forgetting sometimes, 1 or 2. But yeah, being an Iron Woman and then going into WrestleMania, she wasn't to be denied. Not to mention, she's in a group full of men, but every time you pay attention, she's positioned as their equal, not as their valet.
Right. 1,000%. She can arguably be the most popular star right now, the most hot.
Mm-hmm.
She is on fire. And that's one of those unique things where everything fell into place for Rhea to walk out as champion, where like the fans were behind her. She actually had momentum. Her new, gimmick or, group with Judgment Day was actually getting over. So it just was a recipe for something great. And I think it, redeemed Rhea, and it's kind of cool to say that she was the final champion, because now she's going to elevate this new championship in a lot of ways in this moment. So shout out to Rhea. Let's move on to Charlotte, because you can't talk about championships without talking about Charlotte Flair, who has the most reigns in WWE history. When I think of this championship, I'm not gonna lie, I think of Charlotte more so than the Raw.
Ooh.
And I think it's because it's always like random, like the match you were talking about with Asuka. I believe that was for the SmackDown Women's Championship.
Mm-hmm.
It was the catalyst in her feud with Becky Lynch. So it's very much, 480 combined days. Like, wow. Are any of her, even with me saying that, what other feuds are memorable do you remember besides like the Becky Lynch's? Like, she's been champion so many times. Is there a specific reign that you remember that kind of was your favorite?
The one when she was feuding with Bayley.
Which time?
Right before, because we really saw Bayley's transition through Charlotte. But so like, man, a lot to unpack here. But before we get into that, because you said something key, and you said you think of the SmackDown Women's Championship, you think of Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about this earlier as I was preparing for this. I don't think about Charlotte associated with either. If you told me to associate somebody with the championship, and this is going to sound very crazy what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't associate the SmackDown Women's Championship with Charlotte. I actually associate it with Bayley.
Okay.
The Raw Women's Championship, I'm going to be honest, it's Bianca for the length of the title reign, right? But I associate Charlotte with, and if you say who's a women's wrestling champion, right? So I'm not going to give her either belt, but it's like she, it's like she got to have her own
she
belt.
She should just be to standing like that, to just, because there's always a championship across her shoulder. Fun fact, I held Charlotte's SmackDown Women's Champion. Brian H. Waters was there. He saw. She literally, shout out to Krista B, like, we were taking photos with her during the WrestleMania press junket, and she literally like asked me to hold it for her. So, like, I'm a little biased, and she's a queen. We tend to kind of go in on Charlotte because, how decorated she is in such a small amount of time, but that's queen shit. So we stand Charlotte Flair here. And I loved her feud with Bayley, because I feel like that's one of the 4 horsewomen feuds that you kind of don't think of off top. And then you were like, it's like, oh, it's really good, because I think Bayley needed to beat Charlotte to complete her transformation. And then her later beating Sasha was like the icing on the cake for me, I think, for her. So shall we go into Bayley? Because we put the tweet out. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at TWrestlingGirls about the most notable and favorite SmackDown championship runs. And Bayley was kind of the overwhelming pick. She's had the longest reign. And what's funny? Now that I think about it, I kind of also see it with like Bayley. Because she held it for so long and it was so significant in her career.
Yeah.
Shortest reign, Natalya, 86 days. I can't wait to get into her. Most combined days is Bayley, of course, 520 days. And we talked about Charlotte having the most with 7. So Bayley, very interesting person to always look into, because she's like solid, if that makes sense, in like every way. So, but it's fun to see her evolution because of that. So it's like, okay, wow, you're having fun. Like, you're funny. Like, we're seeing a different side of you. So I've been really enjoying Bayley's evolution, and this championship has a lot to do with it. Can you talk a little bit more about what you liked about her feud with Charlotte? And then we can go into her cash-in, because I think that's pivotal.
All right, so as far as Bayley is concerned, what I loved about her, just the fact that, you know, she came in happy-go-lucky, right? You knew she was happy to be there. We saw that on Raw. But it was starting to get to a point where it was getting stale.
Right.
And the thing is, like, when you cater to children, what people have to realize is children get older.
Right.
You know what I mean? As somebody who was a Hulk Hogan fan, by the time I came around, most of the people who grew up with him, they were saying was getting older, right? So while, yeah, I'm a fan, I'm, you know, the Hulkamaniac, but say somebody like my uncle who would have been 16, 17, like, all right, enough of this, right? And then he's ready for the next. So the same thing, like, and we used to say that with John Cena. John Cena is just an anomaly because as more kids kept coming, the kids kept liking him. So where, like, my son was a John Cena fan, but then my daughter was a fan, and they're 5 years apart. So John Cena learned, you know, his character allowed him to stay with the younger crowd. If you look at Bayley, her fans were getting older. And I remember listening to her on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast. It was her and Sasha. And then she did one by herself, and she said, you know, I don't know what I could do, you know, maybe just to give me a little edge, maybe it's change my hair and stuff like that. So then when she did it, I was like, oh, wow. You know, and then just, I remember that day when she debuted the gear she has in this photo and the black hand when she ripped up the Bayley buddies. It was like,
wow. Iconic moment.
Yeah. And that's why, like, I was like, she was definitely like one of my favorites. And this was a feud that I really enjoyed. And once she got a hold of that title, and especially when you saw how she beat Charlotte, just using heel tactics, it was a wrap. She had that on a strangle. She wasn't letting it go. 380 days, you know, and this is, we got to remember, this is during the Vince era. He wasn't holding titles that long most of the time. You know, and people may say he probably forgot that she was the champion. But
I wouldn't be surprised.
You know, but then too, it's like the pandemic. So she was, you know, they wasn't making too many crazy movements where they didn't have to. And, you know, her and Becky Lynch.
She was doing really well. She was evolving. And one thing about her heel turn and her reigns is I appreciate it more now because she was still finding herself. Like, I look at this photo and I think she was still trying to get into into her footing as far as what this new character was. So I'm thinking about her Survivor Series match with Becky and Shayna, which was a little underwhelming in my opinion. It didn't end with Bayley getting she didn't look strong in it, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that might feel a little differently, but we're also in like Becky Mania where I think Shayna won, but then it still ended with like Becky's music. The pay-per-view literally ended. It was the main event of Survivor Series 2019, and it still ended with Becky Lynch's music. And I was just like, houseway. But now I appreciate that. Like, that was a great, in the Survivor Series history, for once we had the NXT mix. That was a great season, Survivor Series season. So I do appreciate that now. And she might be the most identified with it now. For sure. Her cash-in, even before that, and it had to be Charlotte. That was the only way it was going to work. So that was good. Let's go into Natalya.
Oh boy.
So we stand Natalya as champ. She was, I think, a one-time Divas champion.
Yeah. I honestly forgot.
Exactly.
Like, by the time this happened, because that was, I always call that the forgettable period of wrestling. It just wasn't, it didn't hit. There was things, and I'm pretty sure some people love it, but you like Ruthless Aggression fans, they talk about Ruthless Aggression all the time. They think it's the greatest era, and I'm like, y'all just, and they think our era, the Attitude Era sucked. Like, we didn't care about work rate, but I don't hear people popping up for this 2000, say 7 to 2011 era. Like, you know, it had some good stuff in there, but it wasn't like the greatest.
Yeah, and we were talking before about some of the stuff Natalya was doing during that time. So it's not best to look back on. But if you've been a fan of Natty, if you watch Total Divas, you know that she was always sort of chasing that championship, as you should be. And it was always one of those things where, is she ever going to be champion? She's that worker where she's going to show up. She's going to be on TV. She's probably going to have a storyline with someone or a random tag team with someone. But you never think she's going to be champion, which again is fine. So when she beat our girl for this championship, which I think is probably why a lot of people kind of like, okay, 86 days. I enjoyed it though. I think Natalya Neidhart definitely deserved to be a world champion in the women's evolution. I don't see her having another reign anytime soon. And if she does, amazing, prove me wrong. But I look back on this fondly.
I agree. She won in a SummerSlam. We know the SummerSlam pay-per-view is very synonymous with the Harts, the Hart family. Her father, her uncle Brett, they won the tag titles there. Brett, of course, won the Intercontinental Championship there. Then he lost it to her uncle Davey there, and then Brett would win the Brett and Owen main evented SummerSlam. Actually, they didn't main event the show. The Undertaker versus Undertaker did. But they, it was the World Championship match at SummerSlam. And then Brett won the world title at SummerSlam. So we know the SummerSlam is synonymous with the Hearts. That's why I was also so sad when she lost her dad right before one of her... wait, was she in the match? Or did the ladies that was in the match just honor her by wearing pink?
I believe so, but don't quote me on that.
Okay. But it was again right near SummerSlam, and so overall, I thought it was good. For Naomi's sake, we all know our favorites can't hold the title forever. So that was a respect. I think if you make it from WrestleMania to SummerSlam, this was very respectful, and I thought, to see Natty with the title, I thought it was good, and it, to see she was a workhorse, and you have a saying that you say on the fan club, everybody doesn't have to be champion. I think she's somebody that the title, deserves it. And I'm glad she did have a championship run.
I agree. And if she gets another one, that's cool. But shout out to Natalya. So I was just on Natty's Twitter, and she has yet another record that she made. She's the only woman to appear in 5 Money in the Bank ladder matches. She is a Guinness World Record holder. So we will always put respect on Natalya's name. But speaking of Money in the Bank, I want to talk about one of my favorites, and that is Carmella. She held this title, and it was pivotal going into one of the most iconic feuds, Becky versus Charlotte. She cashed in after a historic reign with the briefcase, and it was exciting. So when she finally cashed in on Charlotte, which everyone does, it was fun seeing her as champ. How do you look back on Carmella's reign as SmackDown Women's Champion?
Man, look, underrated. Very underrated. When you think about it, like you said, just one, being the first woman to win the Money in the Bank twice. Then the way she carried the briefcase, the gear. I love how she, made her gear reflect it. And then that night, just cashing in, I thought that was amazing, because she had it long enough where, when somebody wins the Money in the Bank briefcase, usually what happens is they first win it, you always looking, okay, when's the cash in? When's the cash in? Then, if they hold it long enough, it's kind of like you forget about it. Like, but you don't. You know what I mean? And then after a while, and that's what I felt what happened with Carmella, like the Iconics come down there, they take care of business, they beat down Charlotte, and then the music hits. You're like, oh, wait a minute. She does have the briefcase. Mm-hmm. So she had it long enough. And we talk about this all the time, so we hope we can see again soon, even though this might get me kicked out, but we ain't in the club. Even though Trish Stratus wins the money in the briefcase and she cashed in that night, I'm not complaining. But I don't think that's going to happen. But it's just like one of those things where if you see like them holding the briefcase and she held it long enough, and I thought she did a great job. And I thought even as champion, she was great. I mean, she had character, she has personality. Mm-hmm. We've seen her evolve. I don't think she was one of the people that need to evolve so much. You know, she just evolved just with experience, you know. And so even when she was a tag team champion, I would enjoy that run.
Same. And that's one thing I always like about Carmella is every time I see her in the ring, it looks like she's gotten a little bit better. Mm-hmm. We did a Carmella spotlight. Make sure you check that out. And we talked about her feud with like Nikki Bella and how she was really getting that rub. And then for her to have that personality, she's learning. So I think it was a good evolution, especially after making such a wave as Miss Money in the Bank. So shout out to Carmella. I liked her whole gimmick with that because she always talked about how she won Money in the Bank twice. She beat Charlotte Flair twice. She beat Asuka twice. And those things are not easy. And it's a pretty good thing to have on your resume, especially as someone underrated who probably doesn't get the props that they deserve, and how people were probably, and I saw, because this is when I was back in, she wasn't getting her props as champion. A lot of people felt like she didn't deserve to be, yada, yada, yada. But I enjoyed it. And I think she's one of those people that is more appreciated now. Mm-hmm. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and she's proven herself in so many ways. She's evolved in so many ways. So shout out to Carmella.
Oh, shout out to Carmella.
We love her. So let's go into Asuka. We mentioned her earlier. You talked about her match with Charlotte Flair at Mania, I want to say 34.
Yep.
How do you look back on this? A lot of people don't think Asuka has ever really gotten her just due as a world champion. I think she's one of those people that's so good that no matter what they do with her, it's going to feel like it's not enough and she's quote unquote underrated. But how do you look back on her 101 days as champion?
I mean, you just hit it right on the head. You know, it's one of those things where she's so good. She's so polarizing. Mm-hmm. I don't think the previous regime really knew what to do with her. Like, okay, go out there, put on good matches, right? You know, you think about like her NXT run, that was cool. And she was beating everybody. But after a while, the thing about undefeated streaks is they got to come to an end.
Right.
And when you think about people's whose undefeated streaks, and not many people recovered when the undefeated streak becomes a thing. You know what I mean? Like Brock Lesnar was undefeated when he first won the WWE Championship and went all the way and lost to Big Show after Paul Heyman turned on him. But it was never made a thing. And he didn't jump right back into that. But Goldberg, did Goldberg ever really recover? Not to be as polarizing. Yeah, WWE allowed him to like kind of reprogram himself on this latest run. You know, they restored his legacy. But to have the captivate the world the way he once did, no. And I think that's what Asuka, the issue was. She went on an undefeated streak, but at the time in NXT, she was really there to help, one, put over the brand, put over the black and gold brand, but also get used to, I guess, probably get used to the American style and working in America, not just the American wrestler, but just being in America, because there still was nobody believable that was going to beat her. You know, and then people got mad, like she lost to Charlotte. I was like, but who else would have been, when you look at the roster, who else would have made sense for her first loss to come to?
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's when you lock yourself into those things, no one is going to 100% agree that it was the right time to end the streak. and who it's with. So you kind of locked Asuka into that. And I love that match with Charlotte. I wish Asuka would have walked out champion, of course, especially after winning Royal Rumble. But you know what? She won this in 2018. And it was in a TLC match. And I think we all were excited to see that moment. And also that match.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and watch that match and the tag team TLC match the following year with Becky and Charlotte versus her and Kairi Sane. It is two of my favorite women's matches. It's so good. I think they both main evented that pay-per-view. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know it did at least one of them, and they both brought it. So I love this moment for Asuka. I'm always going to appreciate when she has a championship because she is worthy of it. 101 days, you know what? I'll take it.
Yeah, and she was underrated, and that was an underrated match. You know, I ain't gonna lie, it's one I forget about. I remember when it happened because we all kind of knew, like, all right, Charlotte's probably gonna win. It'll go into, you know, WrestleMania, and you figured Charlotte was gonna be involved, but it was cool for Asuka. Maybe they felt putting the belt on Asuka here to kind of give her just due. And then because if I'm not mistaken, that's probably her first championship. So, you know, it gives her chance, gives her spot. But, you know, like we talked about before, there's no way you was going to have the women main event WrestleMania without Charlotte Flair being involved.
It's just one of those things. I do want to talk about how she lost it and the championship. It sounded like I was talking about. I mean, I don't know. Asuka sometimes does look like she might have, especially recently. But
she lost it recently.
Very much so. But I remember her losing it randomly during WrestleMania season to Charlotte. And that was just because they wanted to get the belt on Charlotte to make it a winner-take-all match at Mania, which I fucking hated because I don't like double champions in the women's division.
Okay.
And I felt like it's just, once again, Asuka being used as sort of, and she lost clean. You know, it was like, okay, what are we doing? We had hope for Asuka and you have her lose to Charlotte this way. But, you know, that's the past. Shout out to Asuka. She's in the history books.
I vividly remember that. I was like, for some reason, my daughter was sick. And we was in the doctor's office and I'm watching on my phone. And I'm like, okay, wait, what just happened? Like, but then there's always, you know, we complain on Twitter, but usually people be excited because there's nothing like, you've been to a number of shows, as you say all the time. There's nothing more exciting than being there when a championship changes hands.
Yeah. For sure.
You know, like I was at the Raw in Brooklyn when Zelina Vega and Carmella became tag team champions, you know? And, you know, first of all, like during the match, you saw, like, it was after, you saw all this PDA between Carmella and Corey Graves. But it was just like being in that building, you heard like the pop. It was like, oh man, this is incredible. You know, so no, I don't think too many people complain that, you know, that was there.
For sure.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, it was in Connecticut, which Charlotte has won a couple of championships in Connecticut.
She's won championships everywhere. You know? So let's move on to one championship when I believe you were at, or I think you got emotional when Naomi won at Mania. But she's absolutely one of my favorite champions because, and this is going to sound wild, but like being a wrestling fan sometimes it's wild. But sometimes injuries can work for a story. And I hate to say that because it sounds crazy, but it's a physical sport and sometimes it works. I know, well, I will bet money that if Naomi didn't get hurt and need to relinquish her first reign, she would not have walked out of her hometown as champion. She would have lost it at Mania.
Ooh,
that's
really?
my theory. But because they wanted her to be champion again, and it just, you know, when it's poetic with the hometown and blah, 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 it worked. that's my theory with that. So, and I'm also glad that it lets her having 2 reigns. It's just one of those things that happen. 149 combined days, not bad. It was like that Natalya moment where there's no way Naomi's never going to have a world championship reign. She has been here for a long time. She is a one-of-a-kind talent. People were eyeing for her to win the Divas Championship, and we're upset that she's not a former Divas champ just because of what she brought athletically during that era. But talk to me about the glow.
I've been waiting to talk to you about Naomi for months, and you would think as many conversations we have, we probably would have talked about this, but we haven't. So, that's an interesting take. And it's very interesting, right? And I'm like, wow, I never thought about that she would have lost. But at the same time, I don't necessarily agree, but I see where you're going, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a thing where, because one of those women's titles was going to change hands that night.
Right.
At the time, you had both men's titles, just from perspective. You had both men's titles change hands, which was, Brock Lesnar beating Goldberg, Randy Orton beating Bray Wyatt. You had the tag titles change hands with the Hardy Boys. I want to say Dean Ambrose became Intercontinental Champion that night in the pre-show. And I want to say Neville may have beat Austin Aries for the Cruiserweight title. But
sounds like another universe, bizarro world.
Exactly. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow. Because Bayley, that could have been another excuse to put the belt on Charlotte Flair.
Yep.
But I'm thinking like, man, but I truthfully believe that what you said, though, at the top of the part was key. Injuries play well into a story. Because I did not like Naomi winning the title at the Elimination Chamber in February. I was like, okay, I get it. And it's cool. It's Black History Month. But I was like, she's supposed to win it in Orlando. It's supposed to be a big moment. I always talk about like, we fresh, unfortunately, off the tragedy of the Post nightclub. And then Naomi was somebody who was doing work in the community. So it only made sense for her to have that beautiful homecoming.
Total Divas fame.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But if I could touch on something you talked about earlier, which was people wanting Naomi to be the Divas champion. I don't know if you remember hearing the rumors, but there was rumors that she was supposed to win the title at WrestleMania 30. But Asana hit her and messed up her eye socket.
Her fucking eye socket.
First of all, this is the reason why that never made sense to me. Because Naomi was still in the match.
Right.
So...
Yeah, I actually thought that as well. But
thank you. Somebody else finally, because everybody...
But you can't go on press tours with like a fucking eye band, like a legit eye band. I don't know. She
was already like she was in the match. She was somewhat healed. Like, and I never felt Naomi really found herself until we saw the glow.
Right.
When I didn't, for obvious reasons, I didn't like the breakup with her and Cameron. But I was like, okay, we're getting a series of matches out of those two. But Cameron wasn't on Naomi's level as far as in-ring wrestling. So she couldn't really give Naomi the matches that the other wrestlers could, right? And I always thought they could have been a better tag team because they could have worked well together, but the styles didn't mesh together. Yeah. So that's where I was with that. And then I'm looking at with Naomi and, just when she was a heel, that just didn't work. You've seen Total Divas. So, right. But when she finally got this run, I was all for it. I loved it. And I know a lot of people say they didn't like her run, but it was also like a weird time. I just wish we could have got one match, and that was Charlotte putting her over.
Same.
And I don't know if you saw the clip. Charlotte was speaking of Renee Paquette, when she was still Renee Young, and she said, I want a program with Naomi. And
I literally was about to bring that up, and how Charlotte has always championed Naomi as a superstar. And I think if it was up to Charlotte, they would be booked a lot more than they were and had a significant title feud. I would have loved to seen a competitive feud between them two for like a few months before Naomi left. And who knows? Trinity could come back and it could still happen. But I'm glad that she was a 2-time champion. It was very rewarding seeing her win it. It's one of those things like Becky where I wasn't a fan. Like after Mania 35, I wasn't a fan of the feuds after. Like she had 2 championship pay-per-view matches against Lana. And I'm a Lana fan, don't get me wrong. But I think at that point in time, it didn't make sense to me. I am not delusional and gonna say that it wasn't because it was an interesting Total Divas storyline, and that's probably why they were both cast. So it made sense maybe that they were both in that program. But I think there could have been more done during her reign. But shout out to Naomi though, because having that WrestleMania moment, she made history as a Black woman, and that hometown crowd can't really go wrong when you look back. Yeah. Let's go to Alexa Bliss, because for a while she was the first and only woman to hold both championships. And she was looked at a little bit like Charlotte, where you kind of knew she was going to win. A lot of people, she has a lot of fans, obviously, but then there's also a lot of people that just felt like she wasn't warranted the attention she was getting because there were the 4 horsemen on the roster and there were more quote unquote experienced wrestlers. But she's one of those people that grew on me, and I have to respect it. And I'm not surprised that someone saw something in her and they put the rocket ship behind her, because she has it. Did I love her reigns? Her 2 championship reigns? Yeah. How do you remember them?
Don't necessarily remember them as something to be like writing home about, but I enjoyed the way she won the first one in the tables match, because I didn't see it coming. And the second one, it was kind of like, well, we don't want to put on Becky Lynch, because if we remember, Becky wasn't Becky. Like, she was the last kicker. She was the man. She wasn't the man, but she was on trending downward. Let's be real. So I understood it. But I liked Alexa Bliss in this role, but I would grow to like her more. Like, even if you look at the photo, she looks just younger. She looks still figuring things out. You know what I mean? She's kind of got that generic women's wrestler pose, you know?
1000%.
Exactly. You know, where you see her now, she's like confident. Like, you know, obviously, you know, congratulations to her. She's, you know, with child. But when she come back, she's going to snap right into whatever character. She says she has a character that she's been wanting to try. So I'm excited for that. But I think that, like you said, they saw something in her, and it's been wonderful to watch her grow. But that tables match showed that, like, she'll do whatever it takes to get over.
Yeah, I look back on that fondly. I look back at Mickie James' involvement, throwback, and her and Alexa being partnered together. It's wild shit you forget about.
It's wild that you brought Mickie James, and I just realized she's never held neither title.
Right, which is a travesty. I think her comeback with the momentum she had and working with Alexa Bliss, who was on fire, that should have been the time, even if it was a legend versus protege feud with Alexa Bliss, because Alexa has that tongue where she is going to, you know, lash out and say the kind of edgy things that need to be said to make that feud happen. So I do wish that Mickie won that during this time.
You said it too, which they didn't treat it like. You said she was the legend, right?
Right.
She wasn't treated like that. She was treated like a jobber. Like, okay, a veteran jobber. She was treated more like, I don't want to go as far as say Brooklyn Brawler, but I'll say this.
Oh.
She was treated, let's just say Bret Hart and Marty Jannetty came back. She was treated more like Marty Jannetty as the secondary tag team wrestler who, yeah, he was a legend as a tag team, but, didn't really do nothing as singles. Where if she was treated like Brett, she would have been given her flowers. She would have, had a run or, done stuff. She should have been treated like Edge.
Oh, yeah. I 100% agree with that. But yeah, she started out, that was her title for a while. And she held it for a long time. And she's Alexa Bliss. So I'm excited for when she comes back and does what she needs to do because she's capable of it. Let's move on to Sasha Banks.
Woo!
Because she won the SmackDown title later in her career. When she was blue hair Sasha, she came back better than ever after her hiatus in 2019, and she spent 167 days as champion. She held the pandemic era on her back, was also a double champion. How do you look back on this? I'm looking at this graphic. If you're listening, it's Sasha Banks, blue hair, that beautiful white, golden, black gear with the leopard print. She's owning it. How did you feel about her reign? Do you think it did it justice? Did it redeem her from a lot of those stints as Raw champion we talked about in our last retrospective?
This was Sasha Banks' most important title run, but this is also one of the most important title runs in women's history, in my opinion. And because just the way that led up to it, her and Bayley holding it down during the pandemic. Yeah, I like Sasha's quick run with the Raw women's title during that time. But this right here, because of the friendship, how emotional it was, it was very, very emotional between her and Bayley, as those two ladies, they were friends. So you hit your friends harder. It hurt because of everything that they went through. When you look back before, you thought, okay, their feud was going to start before WrestleMania. Then you thought, okay, then you thought maybe they would break up at WrestleMania. But only for them to extend it and gives us more content, more, really carry us through the pandemic. But then when it finally happened, how emotional. I mean, that was obviously the most emotional Hell in a Cell ever, between that and the bloodline.
Yeah.
That's when the bloodline began. But if when I look back at it, I was like, this is so important. But it was also important too because a lot of people was at home, eyeballs. So you had eyeballs on two minority women, her and Bayley, and then taking us into WrestleMania, the very first WrestleMania in which people are back, the first wrestling show where people are back. And then we get Sasha and Bianca, but leading into it. And I don't know if I ever told you how I thought this was going to be booked. So I had always pictured a world where Sasha and Bayley, when Bayley turned on Sasha, I'd always thought Sasha would stay out till Royal Rumble. And then win the Royal Rumble and then beat Bayley at WrestleMania. Boom. Sasha gets her first championship win at WrestleMania, her first WrestleMania win, and then continues to make history. But I love the way they did it. I actually liked that match when she won this championship. I liked it more than the one in Brooklyn with her and Bayley.
You just gave me chills because she's one of the few who had that one reign, especially because of her history with, the lineage. She had a moment gaining this championship, long history feud, iconic feud that I don't think anyone will be mad if we revisit it someday in the future, winning it at Hell in a Cell. And then she lost it in the first women's WrestleMania main event with two Black women with one-of-a-kind generational talent like Bianca Belair. Both ends of this reign was iconic and memorable, and we're gonna put respect on it because it might not ever be that way because of just how WWE is. But like you said, this is the most important reign of Sasha Banks' career. She would end up holding the tag team championship with Naomi for a while, and then that's it for Sasha. But yeah, I think this is probably underrated in a way, I think, because of the simple fact that it was like that. Sasha's not in WWE. So I didn't see a lot of people talking about Sasha's reign in that tweet that we put out about the most notable SmackDown Women's Champion. But I think this was, at least for Mercedes' career, everything that it needed to be.
Yeah, I think this just means, to me personally, I love this more than any of the Raw feuds that she had, you know,
Same.
and I like those. And, you know, I said that on the last show. I like the fact that her and Charlotte Flair went out there and played hot potato with the belt. You know, would I've liked Sasha to held the title longer in some points? Yeah. But this one right here, she was the boss. She knew who she was. You saw more confident. And, you know, it made a lot of her fans not have to defend her as hard.
Facts. That is 100% facts. So let's move on to Bianca Belair, who we brought up, and that match and that feud put Bianca over as, you know, the female John Cena to a certain extent. She would go on to make history with the Raw belt, but the SmackDown Championship is where it all started. 133 days as champ. She lost. We'll get into that. But I know, you know, you have a daughter. I'm sure that moment between her and Sasha was very important for her. Talk about Bianca becoming champion, and how do you think she's grown in this role since then?
You asked the right questions, because that's exactly, you know, she won the title and it was a moment, right? We talked about it before. I mean, we could do a whole, can we do a watch along on that match? You know, she went out there, she won the championship. The feud was like, leading up to it, there was a lot of stuff that I know the reason why people didn't like, and I can understand that. It felt like they was definitely throwing a lot of stuff at the wall that they didn't have to. Insert Reggie and Carmella. But when she won the championship, it was great. I just felt like as champion, we watched her grow. And what made it so hard for, I think, people to really appreciate it, because we didn't get to really see the chase in person. You know what I mean? We saw the chase in person with her trying to get back to the top. But this one, we didn't really get to see it that way because it was the pandemic. So her chase was in front of screens, and it's a difference. But I thought overall, you know, I thought she carried it well, and she did a great job, as good as especially because she was still learning too. You figure she came to the main roster the night after WrestleMania 36. By the time WrestleMania 37, she was champion.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah, and remember, it wasn't like she was on Raw in front of crowds. She was on Raw in front of first nobody.
That's so true.
The Performance Center, then the screens. So then she, you know, went to SmackDown. So it was like she was learning, and NXT and the main rosters, two different things. NXT and the front, same people.
Universes.
Exactly. You know, but I thought it was good, but clearly we saw what Bianca could be when she went to Raw.
Right. I completely agree. And I think SmackDown is the championship to sort of gain your footing. We talked about the Carmellas of the world, and we'll get into Liv Morgan. But this Rhea Ripley, this was the one that you kind of like dibble and dabble with, and then you go on to Raw. I think we mentioned it in our Raw retrospective of, you know, is that one the main title and is SmackDown one sort of the secondary one? And sometimes I can't really help but believe that. But when you have reigns like the Sasha Banks that we talked about briefly and Bayley's, it's hard to say that. But I think I'm glad you brought up her growth. I didn't even think about that, about how successful she became in a year. And I think about people like my dad, which I always mention, doesn't watch NXT. So when Bianca popped up, he didn't know anything about her. She came with fans who felt like she should have been NXT Women's Champion. She was a one-of-a-kind talent. It took me a while to see that. But there are some people that kind of always saw it. And then you have people like my dad that's like, oh, who's this pretty girl? And, blah, blah, blah. And the confidence she has walking into Mania 37 against Sasha versus the confidence she had walking into WrestleMania 38, compared to the confidence she had walking into 39 is like levels and levels of levels. The swag is out of this world. And I enjoy her feuds with Carmella. Mm-hmm. Their personalities just meshed well for me. I felt like they had a lot of chemistry in the ring. I think that's why WWE always kind of like leans on that. But I thought this was a cool run. Shout out to Bianca.
Facts.
Shout out to Bianca. Let's get into Liv Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, who is one of those slow burn superstars in WWE because she wasn't necessarily the focal point in the Riot Squad with Ruby Riott and Sarah Logan. It was very much about Ruby Riott. Mm-hmm. And I didn't honestly start paying attention to Liv. I always thought her gimmick was cool. The blue tongue was cool. She's cute. But for some reason, like, I didn't start paying attention to her, and this sucks, until like that Brie Bella incident. And I was just like, okay, Liv Morgan. Now now you have my attention, kind of like Taylor Swift, where I did not know who this person was until Kanye interrupted her at the VMAs. And I was like, oh. But she was one of those slow burns where you can see the passion, you can see how hungry she was. She was tested when Riot Squad broke up, when her friends got released, and she's the only one that stayed. And she always rose to the occasion. So a lot of people were waiting for Liv to be champion. I particularly wasn't one of them. As you mentioned earlier, I'm one of those people where I don't feel like everyone needs to be world champion. Mm-hmm. But because I love Liv personally, and I have always kind of been rooting for her, it was fun to see this happen. How do you look back on Liv's reign, her cash in, how she was booked? How do you feel?
I saw Liv Morgan from a different lens, right? I watched her and I thought, okay, she's cool. She's athletic. So I remember Triple H saying this quote about his daughters, how much they love Bayley, and he couldn't understand it. And I was like, wow, he's like, I don't get it, but they're my daughters, they love her. And that's how my daughter is with Liv Morgan. I'm like, Liv's your favorite? Oh, okay, But when I watch her, I'm like, she's like feisty. Mm-hmm. And she's kind of got that attitude of like, won't be denied. And I think because, honestly, they made the right decision. I felt like I enjoy her wrestling more and her character more. I was never really big on Ruby Riott. She ain't do it for me. Mm-hmm. Sarah Logan's cool, but Sarah's like, now she's Valhalla. I think she's in the perfect position because it looked like she's so comfortable being herself. And if they ever decide, okay, we're going to like let her go after the one of the championships or mid-card championship or something, it's going to be like, who want to mess with her? I mean, You're not messing with a woman coming out there with barefoot. You know what I mean?
You silly.
But Liv was just like, and you remember when they tried to give her like the sexy gimmick?
Oh, yes. And that whole shit with Lana.
Yeah, it's just like, no.
It wasn't her.
Yeah, so I like what she's doing now, and I loved her cash in. Didn't see it coming. But if we be honest, it was also kind of like now or never, because, they kind of tried to get her going. What was that, day one pay-per-view and all that? And it just wasn't clicking. Yeah. And I remember being like critical on her on this show I used to do back in the 2021. And, everybody's kind of critical about her. Right. But then now I'm like, okay, she figured it out. And, it was like at the right time, because I felt like if she didn't get the championship when she did, she probably never would have.
I
You know,
agree.
or would have had a hard reset. Let me be fair. You know, she might have went back to NXT and did some things and came back up. But I thought even as champion, I thought she had a solid run. You know, her and Ronda put on some good matches. People just say what they want, but she found ways to make it believable when she would like escape with victories. And it's like, it's good. Everything ain't gotta be ha 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 1, 2, 3. Like, you know, make it make sense, but also, you know, mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think with her reign especially, it was fun to mix it up. That's one of those things I look back and in hindsight I like more. I didn't like how she was. I didn't like that SummerSlam match.
Okay.
I didn't like how that was booked. But looking back, I love it because it was unique, and then because of her physique and her story, it made sense. And also, just shout out to her. She has a pin on Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
There's not many people. Well, now Ronda loses, but at one point, you know, that was huge. And she was in a small number of people. So I will never discredit her for that. And I love that she was able to become champion as herself. Her fans love her for her. She's not doing some weird gimmick that doesn't seem authentic or genuine. And I think kids like Liv because she looks like them. Like kids like wrestlers that are like closer to their size, appreciative to be there, that have that vibe of like, yo, that's one of us. That's why Jeff Hardy will always be endearing to kids because he's just like flying around recklessly. And I just picture like my nephews in the living room, and I'm sure you at some point just jumping off of shit. And Liv gives you that vibe, and she's a wonderful role model.
I was a Matt Hardy fan.
Well, you know what I mean.
I know.
And we love Liv on this show. She's a sweetheart. She's from New Jersey, so you know she's not New Yorker, but you know we rep her that East Coast. She's hungry. She loves wrestling. Her story is very similar to Sasha Banks in a way where this was just her heart, and she couldn't imagine doing anything. And she shows up, and she gives a fuck, and she cares. And I love that. She's injured right now. I can't wait for her to come back. I hope they do more with her. She's one of those people, sadly, that I think is going to be the victim of being dependable, where she may not ever reach like a natty, where she'll never probably be in that championship scene, but they'll always kind of keep her around to like do random tag teams and all that kind of stuff. I hope I'm wrong, but I would like to see her get her, you know, steam rolling again. But I'm glad, you know, Liv Morgan can say she's a former world champion. Yeah, I love it. So let's get into Ronda, and then we'll close out with the first inaugural SmackDown Women's Champion. So Ronda, like Sasha, won this championship later on in her career. She previously held the Raw Women's Championship. But how did you feel about Ronda Rousey? She came back. She won this title. She held it twice. Did you like it? Let me know.
I loved it more this than the Raw one, because this didn't feel like, all right, we got to put the title on Ronda because she's this big star. I felt like she went through the trenches, you know, coming up short to Charlotte at WrestleMania, and she had to like really dig deep to the point like she like really hurt Charlotte to become the SmackDown Women's Champion, and then just getting caught off guard and, you know, losing it to Liv and then, you know, getting it back. It just felt like she felt more a part of the roster. It's like, okay, you say you want to be a part of the roster. You say you want to be with the girls. Go out there and do it. You know what I mean? And it felt like that now. And that's what I like. This really pivoted her where it didn't feel like she was being Brock Lesnar. And it's like, when you really see this, you're like, wait a minute, Ronda's actually there every week. And, you know, she wasn't a special attraction. Like, she's going to be naturally. But it's like, nah, you know, she was like, nah, I'm down for the cause. I'm here to work. You know, of course, before this, she had all that quote that went viral and stuff. And, you know, you could tell, like Ronda Rousey, like, likes to be cheered. You know, I think now she's getting to the point, it's like, okay, it's actually kind of,
what it is.
Yeah. But you can tell, like, she likes to be cheered. But I enjoyed this.
I did too, and I disagree with a lot of people that say it doesn't look like she's having fun this time around, because I actually think it's the opposite. I think she doesn't have that pressure of, you know, I think losing, and this is going to sound wild, was probably a weight lifted off of Ronda's shoulders in a way, because like she can now be treated like one of the roster because she's not so invincible. So I did appreciate that. And her losses felt real. It felt like, you know, again, she got cashed in on and got the run over, and, you know, the way she lost, every loss she had, you know, elevated things. No matter how you want to look at it, because she is Ronda Rousey, and now she's getting to work with her best friend Shayna Baszler, and I think she's actually having fun. I don't think she'll ever be 100% comfortable in front of the WWE universe because, like you said, she likes to be cheered. So I think there's always going to just be that, like, you know, uncomfortableness in a way, which is why I think people say that she's not having fun just dealing with the crowd. But I do believe that that's going to change the more she kind of just gets used to it and remember like who the fuck she is, like you're Ronda Rousey. So I digged it. I love that Liv Morgan got the rub, and she was going to hold all the championships. Let's be real. And she did. Yeah. And it was fun to watch. So shout out to Ronda Rousey. So we can't talk about the SmackDown Women's Championship without talking about the first one, Becky Lynch. But very quickly, before we pivot to Becky, I do want to note that it was time for her to lose Ronda Rousey. It was time for Ronda Rousey to lose the SmackDown Women's Championship. And that made Charlotte Flair babyface for once, because she came back on the same night and relieved us of that last bit of that reign. So I don't know. I just felt the need to point that out there, and Charlotte became champion. And
that was like New Year's, right? That was like right before. Yeah, it was right before New Year's. Talk about like
a good present,
a Christmas gift.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about Becky Lynch. And we talked briefly earlier in the episode about you just, you know, learning about this new championship. She was in, I want to say, a 6-pack challenge.
Yeah.
In 2016, Alexa Bliss, Carmella, Naomi, Natalya, and Nikki Bella. What I liked about this match is it ages well. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think it ages well. I don't think it was appreciated enough at the time because it felt secondary. It was at Backlash. It wasn't at like Mania or anything like that. It was a 6-pack challenge. And to some people, that booking can feel a little lazy in the women's division, but it is a good match. And it was one of those things where you didn't know who could win. Like, you know, Nikki Bella could have easily won, you know, coming back and her being on such a run that she was on. Naomi, everyone was kind of, I think she was the fan favorite to a certain extent. Alexa Bliss is on fire. So it could have, you know, Natalya, it could have gone a lot of ways. Did you see Becky Lynch being the first champion? Do you feel like this first reign was significant? How did you feel about it?
I think it was one of those things where it felt more rewarding because she didn't get the NXT championship. So it was like, okay, you know, she worked hard. She was definitely like, the wrestling was always there with Becky, you know, and at this time the character's fresh. It's something new. So it's cool. So I felt like her winning, being the first champion, made sense. I think I was all in thinking Nikki Bella was going to take it at the time. But, you know, this was, you know, it was definitely a good move, but with her, it wasn't so much her losing the championship. It was like after she got it back after a while, she kind of slipped and kept falling by the wayside. And that's what happened with her.
I agree. And even just looking at this photo, it's a photo of last kicker Becky. She's like super smiley. That green women's wrestling pose, one of them that we talked about with like the Alexa Bliss graphic. She hasn't found herself yet. She had the fans behind her. She had the wrestling ability. She had everything it takes to be a WWE superstar, which is why she was coined the 4 Horsewomen, why she was involved in the things that she was involved in. But something wasn't clicking. But I do feel like it was a good choice to have her be the first champion. And I'm sure because of the heights she's gone since then, WWE is very happy that she holds this record in the history books as being the first champion. But it was fun. I think her most pivotal would be her feud with Charlotte Flair, walking out of WrestleMania 35, the first women's main event, holding both this championship and the Raw Women's Championship, and what she did with that. It was iconic.
Mm-hmm. The facts. It definitely was, and in order to get to the main, we do have to have these humble beginnings. You know?
Right. 1,000%. And for a while, that belt was associated with Becky. She lost it to Charlotte Flair. It was very much ingrained into their feud. It was very exciting to see Becky go to Raw after this, because at that point she was so on fire and so self-realized as the man, that now it's like, go to that next, the actual, main title. And I would love to know what people think about that, how I feel about the hierarchy of these titles. I think Raw's the main, and Smackdown, it's like 1A, even if it's 1A and 1B, I think Raw is that one. So Becky, tried out with the Smackdown one, and then she elevated to the Raw. But I can look back and enjoy every time Becky has held this championship.
No, agreed. Definitely agree.
It was great. I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up carrying it again. At some point. Let's talk about really quickly, just so that we can complain, because we wouldn't be wrestling fans if we didn't. How she regained it after coming back, after having a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, I shouldn't even say regained, because she was Raw Women's Champion when she left.
Yeah.
And came back at SummerSlam.
Well, she never got the rematch. Remember?
Yes.
Because she was on Raw. She lost the SmackDown championship, but she was still Raw champion. Because, Pete said, I don't like double champions.
It is what it is. Another notable thing about Becky Lynch's time with this belt is it's big time Bex. It was her heel-ish character. And one thing that's so fascinating about Becky Lynch is the times that she's meant to be heel and we're supposed to boo her, but then she ends up being so fucking cool that we're just fuck it. And she had to work hard to get us to actually boo her. Beating Bianca Belair in those matter of seconds, I think, was supposed to be it, but we were just so happy to have her back that we still didn't really fully boo her. And then she was doing more character work as Big Time Bex, and then we finally got to that point, and it led to Bianca Belair leaving Mania as champ.
The thing is, though, I will stand by this statement that it was the right move, because we know those return pops.
Kind of agree now.
When those return pops happen, no matter who you are, people are going to cheer. And if they would have given us a 10-minute match and Becky would have won, people would have cheered. And Bianca Belair would have had to really work hard to get back and get the fans behind her. But because it happened so quick, everybody felt robbed. One, you robbed us the match. We wanted to see the rematch between
Sasha.
Yeah, Sasha and Bianca. We didn't get that, but now we get what? And then Becky, you just gonna come in here and take the title and then brag about it? Oh, it's easy to hate you.
Right.
And like you said, yeah, and look who she was going against. But then this also made us say, okay, now we can see Bianca's adversity and see her climb back to the top. So that's why I always say it was the right move. And I remember arguing with Krista B, shout out to her, arguing with her about it in Dallas at the chicken spot. And I was like, it was a bag of bones.
Yes, so good.
Yeah, man. We gotta go back just for that. They don't even have to have wrestling. We going back to Dallas.
Yes.
But I was like, it had to go down that way.
Yeah. You gotta have polarizing moments like that. That's what wrestling's all about. And if you wanted to make Bianca the uber baby face, you had to have that happen. Because like you said, if they had a lengthy match and Bianca lost clean, I don't think that would have done anything for her character. I think if she beat Becky, although I'm sorry, I just don't, some people, it is what it is. Like with Charlotte, like Becky Lynch, like she's coming back. She's not fucking losing. So as soon as her music hit, I was just saying, okay, here we go. I'm already disappointed about no Sasha.
Yeah.
And now Becky's back, and it was very soon. I didn't see it coming, but she came back in better shape. She came back, how she's able to evolve in that way and have her hate us to now she's back to the man character currently. And it's almost like we love her more because we respect the growth and the journey.
Yeah.
That we've been there. So shout out to Becky. I love her history with this champion. We don't get the man without this championship. Her feud with Charlotte Flair doesn't happen. Her evolution matches, like she did that. She had 2018, 2019 on lock, and I'm glad that we kind of ended with her to sort of go back. But I love this. I love looking back on this history. I would love to do more retrospectives with Brian H. Waters. I know you have a busy schedule.
No, that's gonna happen. We're gonna make it work. I'm excited. This was a lot of fun. I always enjoy having these conversations and just going back, and it just takes you back in time, takes you back in, where you was in wrestling and the way wrestling was, but also sometimes the way the world was too. You think back when Becky came back. That was the second time they did? That was before wrestling went back on the road. Because I remember, you remember the commercials that said WW's return home, and they gave you a list of cities. And so, like, I know I mentioned like my daughter a lot, but this is around the time where she's like learning like how to read and recognize words. So when she saw Baltimore, she's like, "Can we go?" And sure enough, that was her first show, which we did get Sasha and Bianca. Wasn't no title on the line, but it was the Smackdown draft, so it was cool. But like I said, just takes you back. You think about the pandemic era. Shout out to Bayley and Sasha holding it down during that time, holding it down in that Thunder.
No, they really did. And this is such a great history. I'm looking at these champions: Becky, Alexa, Naomi, Natalya, Bayley, Asuka, Carmella, Charlotte, Sasha, Bianca, Ronda, Liv Morgan, and the last champion, Rhea Ripley. This is a great pool of talent, and diversity. I love very, very diverse. And yeah. It was awesome looking back. I don't think there's any champion here that I feel like didn't make a mark. So shout out to this championship.
That's 2016 and 2023. That's a good point. That's why you Queen PR. That's why you're best in the world, what you do.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate you joining me on this. And a shout out to our patrons, because this is coming out on Patreon exclusively first. We will be creating more content like this, so stay tuned. If you haven't checked out our Raw Women's Championship retrospective, make sure you do that. And if you want to hear us talk about wrestling and join in the conversation, just join us every Wednesday with the crew for TWG Fan Club, our weekly wrestling fan club live on Twitch, where we talk about everything wrestling. So join us there. Brian H. Waters, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at Brian H. Waters on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. You can find me at the Wrestling Around Now podcast every Wednesday night, 10:30 p.m. Of course, you can find me in the club on Wednesdays, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Those Wrestling Girls Twitch. And then don't forget, Wednesday Worldwide on Wednesday mornings. Well, Wednesday afternoons by the time it drops.
I love it. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate our TWG universe. And we will see you later.